Welcome, everyone. Hello, episode 91. So honored and privileged to have Dr. Kelly Brogan on today. And this is one of my heroes in this world of people willing to speak truth to power, and learned a lot from listening to her, especially as of lately, as her message continues to evolve and becomes more um, elaborate and simple at the same time. So, Kelly, welcome today. Appreciate you taking the time. How are you feeling? How are you doing?
Such a pleasure to be in conversation with you.
Oh, thank you, Kelly. Yeah. It's been wonderful to connect with you. Kelly and I met through a Telegram group that's private and small and really amazing. And I was so honored to be invited in to share in there. And then Kelly reached out and we've been talking a bit, and it's just been great conversations. We're in similar, we've come to similar conclusions about things through different ways and means of getting there. And that's always very validating and helpful. So yeah, I've noticed you've been in the Telegram group a lot longer, and it's such a cool group of folks, and seems like a really supportive group for you. And yeah, I'm just wanted to ask about all that you've gone through since the 2020 vision, as a lot of us are calling it, and what it unveiled, and how much you've changed, and yeah, kind of where you get support during these times. And would just love to hear, yeah, a little synopsis of your last 4 years, if you don't mind
Is this
sharing.
a weekend workshop we're doing now? Because like
I
that is
know.
quite the narrative, but it's probably very similar to almost everybody listening. So it will be a familiar rendition, I imagine. I mean, the group that you're referencing is such an important source of belonging for me that I think the couple of years leading up to it was really like in service of the awareness that I have this, what Francis Weller, I don't know if you've heard of him. He wrote a book called The Wild Edge of Sorrow. He talks about the community wound, right? Like this aching, this yearning that we have to be uh gazed upon by familiar. He says like 40 eyes that you wake up to every morning kind of a thing. And there were so many iterations of that over these couple of years. I think many of us were drawn to community. I host an online community called Vital Life Project, and there's a lot of like-minded coalescence, like-hearted coalescence, but it almost became like more and more specific, like the feeling of being seen and understood. It was like more and more refined for me. Like it wasn't enough that you understood the health bit that I believe in. Like you had to also understand this and this and this and this. And so, those of us who have found each other, and you and I are examples of that. We just perceive reality through very, very similar lenses. And it must be that the aspects that we value, they kind of come together in a package or something, because you can't otherwise explain all of the different points. And maybe we'll touch on some of them today that, you and I, for example, have reached common ground on over such disparate journeys, like you said, and paths. So I think that the summary of the past couple of years, I was one of those with a really big mouth at the beginning in 2020, because I had a decade behind me of angry activism, warning that this was coming, right? Mostly the pharmaceutical dimension, let's say, of it, I would say. But I had already disabused myself of germ theory. And so as soon as I started hearing about things related to infection and contagion, I knew something was up. And so I fancied myself, an important source of information at the beginning, and, informing all of the people about the deception. And I really, in many ways took the bait of that dialectic, right? And engaged in my pull of the sort of the good bad mirror, right? Where I imagined that I was on the side of truth and righteousness and goodness. And it wasn't until I would say like 6 or so months in that I started to remember, the work that I had dedicated myself to personally, uh, in the years prior. Honestly, mostly inspired by the challenges that I was having in my primary romantic relationship that really, incentivized me, I would say, to learn how to source my own needs, within myself, and to resolve what I would call victim consciousness, right? So this poor me, so sad, no fair energy that always has a finger pointing, at somebody else who is responsible for my struggle. And if only they would get it, right? Like if only they could see what I see, then I would finally feel okay. And so I recognize that same pattern, uh, and I decided to do some very uncomfortable, to put it euphemistically, inner work, and to look at how I might be embodying that which I was judging, right? So, let's summarize it as like tyrannical, authoritarian energies that know better than we do for ourselves, or so they say, right? That's the party line anyway. And so I looked at my life, and I looked at my mothering, and I looked at my business, and I looked at my, relationships, and I could identify many instances where I was very invested and attached to being perceived as right and good, and where I insisted that I knew better than somebody
Mhm.
else, uh, how they should be humaning in their lifescape. And I decided to focus on that. I re-recorded literally all the videos in my signature health program, Vital Mind Reset, because I decided that the energy was too similar to that which I was judging, like too sort of like chippy and sort of know-it-all authoritarian energy. That you can look at videos of me, on YouTube from 2014, 15, 16, and I have a lot of that, right? So I have this, a lot of the energy of that which I judge. And that's the nature of this like parentification that we do of these authority figures, right? It's like an opportunity to work out some old stuff, and namely the, what in psychology is called the introjects of our bad parents, right? So um like Jung would
Mhm.
call it like the negative animus in me, right? So that like bad masculine, bad daddy, that I see on the outside because I haven't matured it and integrated it within me. So I would say I like started that work, and it started immediately to liberate energy for me. And I know this is like, it's your expertise. Like, how do we, relieve
Mm.
energetic twists and knots so that we can use more of it in real time? And I decided to organize what became, an international rally called the Thank You Body Rally. And
Mm.
that was in 2020, in late 2020. So it's just months into this
Wow.
process. And the goal of it was non-oppositional, non-confrontational, and really just celebratory, right? So like people all over, I think it was like 104 countries, um, gathered, and they made little signs, and they celebrated what they had experienced in their bodies, through their bodies, with their bodies, that was otherwise dogma defying, right? So they celebrated their body's capacity to heal in ways that we are not told that it is able to. And it was so fucking cool. It was so inspirational, so amazing. We had an event here in Miami, and that
Mm.
was sort of the remembrance for me of like, that Bucky Fuller quote of, you don't change the existing system from within,
Yeah.
you right, create a new one that renders it obsolete. And as I continued to really look at where I was, I call it now buying eggs from the hardware store, like where I was insisting that something be different
Yeah.
than it was, and that I be able to source love and meet needs from the impossible place. I uh, I ended a lot of relationships. I reorganized, as I know you're also familiar with, right? Like that process. Um, I reorganized many aspects of my business and my mission, and I changed the way that I mother. And that was a
Yeah.
big one for me, was the subtle, right? Because I thought I was, doing the cycle breaking thing, right? As this like courageous woman who was, ending the abuse of my mother line or whatever. And I had just basically greenwashed and repackaged as holistic mothering so many of the energies of conditional love.
Wow.
And that was extremely humbling. So yeah, these past 4 years have been a reorganization around the value of sovereignty. And what I mean by that is not necessarily what I thought it meant, which is like, raising chickens in my backyard and getting off my iPhone and, looking into, private organizations and that kind of a thing. It really was, and is a practice of developing emotional self-mastery and understanding how to see others as other and remain connected as I prioritize the meeting of my own needs so that I'm not making covert agreements and engaging in these manipulative exchanges that were so part and parcel of my life and really draining a lot of vital force energy through shame and other hiding and again, no big things, but just this way of being living kind of behind a glass wall. So it's been quite a journey, I would say.
Incredible explanation of your time and really well said. Yeah, I heard a talk you gave on True Earth. I think that's Austin Whitsitt's thing that you were on, and yeah, it's for you to speak to the truth community about these topics and about the rabbit holes and the different ways in which we become consumed by a different source of information. And just really, I've noticed in the truth community or in this community of people that are curious and unbiased and willing to learn that there's a shift. They're starting, pretty big names are starting to recognize how important it is to just go inward and really heal our own perspective and perception instead of giving this attention and energy to these exciting, powerful people that have accumulated all this wealth and are attempting to maybe achieve an agenda that would benefit they believe themselves. And all that's so much to look at, right? To put that, to pretend that that's separate from us and to not recognize that part of us, and that, so to hear you explain it the way that you did, it's really helpful to me, and I'm sure to a lot of people. So thank you. It's a revolution, really. Like it's needed. The trap was set and we felt we went into it, and then enough of us were able to be like, wait, something's off here. This isn't what it's not the sexy thing it sounded like it was going to be. Like I was going to get to be the one that was right. And so the ego traps are just always in place there. And that's, shamans say that um they have no business following the ups or downs of their fellow man. They're really taking a plunge into their inner journey. And that's why I never thought I would be interested in simulation theory. But what people are saying is it's a construct that's overlaid and it's designed, like the events of our life are already decided. It's an obstacle course in which we get to be inside of. And it's not like we're going to get rid of its tyranny. It's a central theme within our process of discovering ourselves. And so if we spend our life trying to change something that isn't changeable, when there's so much that we can be doing to change ourselves, then in reality, our reality will change. And shamans even say we don't even have to stay here. There's other layers, other worlds we could learn to go into, like the Mayans did. And that maybe on some level, that's the training, the ground, is that this contracting that's happening, that's playing out on the world stage, is forcing us to discover resources within ourselves that we wouldn't have, right? So, or like I have a friend who was dying and was full organ failure, and he was ready to turn himself over to the hospital system to heal. But because of 2020, he's so thankful. It forced him to heal himself through staying at home, taking psychedelics, and he had a voice tell him, "You have to stop eating anything but beef or lamb, because he had been eating so much nuts and butters and trying to be so healthy through the system that turns out he was just the amount of oxalates he was putting in his body was overwhelming his system. And so sometimes you have to do extreme things to rebalance your being. And now he's one of the most healthiest, beautiful people I've ever met. But he's had to be, because he was so sick and dying, which was from overworking. He was a workaholic and he made a lot of money, and it almost killed him. Right now I'm thinking this is the formula: workaholism until you almost takes you out, and then you've got all this money to heal. Right? I always kind of judged it, but now I'm like, hey, it's not such a bad deal because he's just thriving, and yet he almost took himself out. So you had mentioned being a workaholic in the past, and I think that's an area that's fascinating to me. It's not something I've ever done. I fell in love with construction. I fell in love with it, but I never followed through with schooling and things like you did and really fell into the system. And so how has it been for you to have been so, how do you manage your life with all that you got going on and still heal from workaholism now that you've recognized how important it is to be in your body and less in your mind?
Hmm. I love that story. And, I'll just say before I answer your question that, and I think we have this in common, that I live for the reveal that I was like totally wrong about something. Like it's so fun for me now to, wake up to a theory that actually 5G towers are a hoax, right? And there's nothing to worry about or whatever. Like I'm not saying
Yeah.
that's true or not true, but I delight in the
Mm,
play of it and the potential layers and being wrong about the things and having, friends of friends, I would say, who have never thought for 1 second about their diets and are robustly healthy. And then
yeah.
have, my friends who are like constantly struggling with like digestive issues or whatever. And just really at a certain point,
Mm,
like releasing all of the constructs, right? Like all of the intellectual frameworks
mm,
and beginning that journey, home to intuition. And I would say that's where I find myself now, 15 years into health reclamation, holistic health, and really studying people who have changed their story about diagnoses, their need for pharmaceuticals, and have done it, through a ritual. So, I have this program and I believe that it is just a ritual. That's what it is, a 44-day ritual. And then they go on, to have these experiences of finding themselves, remembering themselves. And I am at the point now where I feel again, like a novice, like I'm at the beginning of a new, so I established some degree of expertise, and you can even say some degree of mastery, right? In that realm, playing in that realm of like, what is it to take back power from the allopathic system? And now I'm at the bottom again, recognizing this is all about energetics. It's all
mm,
about energetics. And I don't, I am not an expert. And that's why I've called in folks like you. And I study also with Carolyn Lovewell, and I have other, teachers and people who inspire me. My best friend is a clairvoyant, and who inspire me through their capacity to access guidance. Right. Of course, there's, um, plant medicine, but to access guidance in nonlinear, non-intellectual ways, because we're in it together, right? What was the NLP slogan? Like, alone together, whatever the hell it is. We're in it together, and it's your story, right? Like it's my story. And in the end, I can feel supported, I can feel connected, but I have to interpret the dialect like of my own narrative. And that's kind of the good news and the bad news, is that it's up to me, right? So how am I going to develop mastery? I stopped drinking alcohol, which the dovetails to your workaholic question, which I would say I didn't drink any alcohol until like all in college and med school, because I was like identified as like straight edge. Like that was kind of my like shtick.
Okay.
And I was like in a crowd where that was kind of like the thing, right? And then I was courted by the pharmaceutical industry as an intern, where I was working like 100 hours a week, making literally like $3 trying to survive in Manhattan. Okay, for that first year, and then my residency. And they would take us to these like 5-star restaurants. This was back in the day, and there'd be like, Veuve Clicquot on the table, and the super expensive meal, and I'm there with my like homies, and so I was like, oh, free. This is great. And so since that time, I've had like a very celebratory relationship to alcohol, where like I would go out with a friend to dinner and have like a mezcal or scotch. I was, like hard liquor. And I stopped a year and a half ago, simply because, well, I got that message, right? But I never had any consequences. Nobody was like, Kelly, I'm worried about you. And I sort of felt like, oh, this is how I balance. Like I play, I feel my heart open, I play. This is how I
Yeah.
balance my work, right? Create that sort of like yin energy in my life. And the reason I ultimately did was because I am interested in cultivating my superpowers, right? Because I am interested in refining my energy, and I want to play the game at a higher level. Like that's
Mm.
actually why. And so the motivation is totally different from like, oh, I want to give my liver a rest and I want to be healthy, right? Like that motivation for a lot of people serves at a certain stage, right? And then you need a different yes in order to pull you away from habitual ways of living and pattern disrupt, right? And so to answer your question, I think about these things. I'm very influenced by a teacher by the name of David Data, and I think of these things in terms of masculine and feminine polarities. And I know that's kind of in the zeitgeist right now, but it's an easy way for me to organize the energetic signatures. And I think I am like many women. In fact, I've just finished a book where you're referenced, called The Reclaimed Woman, that is coming out in June. I've just finished a book about this for these women like myself, because of course you write the books you need to read, about the bait and switch of feminism, right? So I was raised by a mom, as many of us were, who was influenced by, the waves of feminism
Yes.
that essentially say that, if you serve an employer, you're free. And if you serve your husband, you're a slave, right? And that I needed to establish my financial independence and to be totally self-sufficient, and that there was a well-trodden path by which I could, achieve that. And that I just needed to get straight A's and go to a great school and then get a job that paid well. And I did all of those things, motivated extrinsically, right? So I was motivated by, and my mom is an Italian immigrant, and any second generation kids know that you're not encouraged to get good grades often. It is a mandate.
Mm.
And so I was motivated very much by this external locus of validation,
Yeah.
right? And it was really crystallized for me in a powerful way. And so I developed what I call a lot of masculine competencies. And I did
Mm.
so out of survival, right? Because it's not a luxury when you link in a child's mind approval and attachment security with performance and achievement and productivity. It's an existential matter, right? And so that what Data calls a masculine shell was formed over my feminine essence.
Yeah.
And I developed these competencies where I became very good, in fact, better than most of the men in my midst at many of these skills, right? Linear thought and solution orientation and execution and integrity of word, and really looking at life as, you know, problems that I could remedy.
Hmm.
And it was at really like the pinnacle, I would say, of the promise of feminism, which is that, I could disabuse myself of all of the inconveniences of a female body. I took birth control for 12 years. I, was very interested in all of the pharmaceuticals that were offered to women, like the HPV vaccine. I was interested in elective C-section because I was like, why would a woman ever unnecessarily experience pain just to get the baby out, right? Like this is literally the
Wow.
consciousness that I was steeped in, and I was a very angry woman masking a deep fear of
Mm,
men. And
mm,
I believe that all women walk the earth with this biological awareness that we are vulnerable,
wow.
and that appeasement of men is a very wise strategy, and
Mhm,
manipulation also, falls into that category. And I just had never really acknowledged that simple, basic fact, and
yeah.
instead masked it over, with a lot of anger. And I would argue that most of my activism really spawned from that place. It was like a tantrum at, the bad, well, really, it's like the two-headed monster, right? The bad daddy, mommy kind of a thing. But it really wasn't until I would say like the past couple of years that as a single woman with a successful business, who's totally self-sufficient, right? Like I don't need a man. I don't need one. I've been living without one just fine. And I was able to really resolve the gaslight that says, you know, ladies, you're empowered and free now. You're happy now. Right.
Mhm,
And I was able to resolve that gaslight by acknowledging that there is something other than freedom, which
mm,
really is a masculine virtue, right? Especially according to data, something other than freedom that we have longed for. Um,
mhm,
and I have come to the conclusion that our primary need as women is, well, you could say as humans, but is safety. And that was never promised, and cannot be achieved. In fact, like it's not possible through the means that we've been offered, that we
right.
could feel safe in the world, because we are engaged in a zero sum game, not only on our insides, right? So my inner masculine, feminine polarities at war with one another. My inner masculine saying, do more, achieve more. What the fuck is wrong with you? Like, get to work, right? And
Yep.
my inner feminine, like, having hysterical outbursts every once in a while, right? Or otherwise like expressing overwhelm or
True.
numbness, right? And the mirror is, of course, recapitulated on the outside between men and women, where there is this zero sum game, especially in dominant culture, where men are expected to apologize, right? And to subdue themselves, and to otherwise um, be uh, otherwise be rendered sort of like, almost like cartoon like versions of what is possible for a man. And I am not a man. I have no idea what it's like to be one. You can tell me, but I can only imagine that it's quite confusing, right? It's quite confusing, the way it is for us to be a man right now, because of the emasculation related agendas that have been run on men, from feminism to the new age, encouraging men to get in touch with their feelings, and, otherwise really soften into this neutralized place. And so the feminization of men, the masculinization of women, you could say like, oh my God, this is horrible. What are they doing? And then you pile on a couple of, pronoun and trans agendas, and we're just this like the gray wash of what was otherwise like a very finely organized and specific black and white. And my sense is that actually this is, I don't believe in mistakes.
Yeah.
And I do my best not to believe in victims, and victimization, really. I just choose for my own experience to not subscribe to that, a framework. And because of that, I see like, oh, this could be also by design, right? So that I am have this cultivated defensive system that is only in place because I'm fundamentally, still in my wounds, in my traumas, and unsafe, right?
Sure.
And what opportunity do I have now? right? Because
Mhm.
I can choose. I can play pantsuit girl boss
Right.
all fucking day long. I have all the opportunity to do that. And to say, fuck men who needs them.
Yeah.
I can do that. And I also can choose to submit
Mm.
to a man that I deem and discern to be trustworthy, right?
Yeah.
A dominant man. I can choose to, which is my, chosen path. I can choose to play with these energies and soften to the greater design, to God, to spirit in my own life on my own, and see what happens, right? So you can pick any character you want. And the choice is what renders the result like all the more amplified with power, I would say, right? Because historically we didn't necessarily have all of these different choices. So um,
Mm.
my sense of resolving the workaholism is quite different now, because it's not like, oh, I'm working too hard, I should also go on a vacation or whatever, or feeling self-conscious about it, or like subtly deriving a sense of identity, right? Like the old me would have said, oh yeah, I'm such a workaholic, but also like really kind of like loved that about myself, right? And thought that that conferred importance and significance to
Sure.
my self-concept. And now it's that like pleasure and play and open spacious time and time with my kids and animals and outside. I i have connected my old motivations to the prioritization of these things, because
Mhm.
I know that they yield. It's almost like I have discovered that, when I want to birth a new creative project, I go on vacation with my girlfriends, right? Or I go to the beach, or I spend 4 hours learning a dance choreography. It always works this way. And this is not, something I've discovered. This is known. It's the pattern disruption, right? And it's also, when you're moving that vital force through your body, it infuses and informs your senses. And so I've sort of brought that, because I believe our defenses are important and valid and need to be honored, not transcended or squashed or, shamed away. Like I don't believe like you tell your inner critic to shut up or whatever. Like I don't, that's not my belief system. So in order to honor the part that says work more, do more, get more done, what does your to-do list look like? Um, I remind that part that even more will get done in this, paradoxical way. If I prioritize these things, it's like when I started going to bed years ago at like 9 o'clock,
Yeah.
that part of me was like, well, but you're missing like 5 hours of time when the kids are asleep where you could be getting so much stuff done. What are you doing? And I would be like, just watch, just watch how much I get done when I go to bed at 9. Um, and then that was my lived experience. It's just like my productivity skyrocketed the moment I prioritized, my sleep in that way, for example. So it's really, it's the micro version of the macro we're talking about, which is resolving these zero sum games, ending the war on
Yeah.
the inside in service of complementarity, right? In service of really seeing an experiential outcome that wouldn't otherwise be possible if we were insisting that one side is right and must be in the superior, position, I would say.
Wow.
That was a
Incredible.
mouthful.
Such a powerful transformation, Kelly. Truly, it's inspiring. And, I talk a lot about the difference between discipline and impeccability. Discipline being a fear-based, sort of rule-oriented, more linear way of controlling your reality, your environment, maybe how you look, or some, it's more typically in the realm of the ego and the shallow areas of doing things because, like, denying yourself what you want so that you can tell yourself, okay, I'm disciplined, I'm better than those people that can't say no, right? And that ends up isolating you, separating you from those people that you're now judging, right? Where impeccability is a totally love-based, like what you said, it's like it's coming from a place of yes rather than actually stemming from a place of no. So the yeses and the nos, that's something I help my clients with, is the ability to say yes over and over in different ways, and how that feels, how that opens them up, right? And then the no, like how strong is your fucking no? Like when it needs to be, right? So boundaries within this realm of, subtle energy exchanges that are tricky and challenging to clear. We become empowered when we get these clarities, and then we follow through with them, like going to bed at 9, and how much that will take care of your entire being. And that's the thing a lot of people don't know about, is this whole other side of like the feminine, the rest, the going inward and healing and giving your body the break that it needs so that it can actually process. Or dancing, right? Like a lot of my clarity comes to me, it shows. I'm in music, I'm inside of this field of movement with everybody else doing something similar, and I get moved to tears with revelation around my life and my future. I get shown things that are going to come to me, right? And a lot of people just don't know how to give themselves permission to truly do the things they want, because of whatever story from their past has conditioned that and keeping them from their true desires. And I think it has a lot to do with the fear of what one might discover inside of that. It might be dangerous to their relationship if they open up to what they truly desire, right? And so we hold each other back, especially in relationships. So I find a lot of people who are in their inner single journey, not in relationship, are doing a lot of work. And a lot of people that are in relationships are, not able to really get to that level of work because it's inconvenient to the relationship itself. So the relationship, like the medicine woman we would work with, would take a couple and give them a third entity, which is the couple itself. So there's you, the other person, and then the third entity, which is the combined,
Yes.
right? And then you can see, like, you can get a vision of what that combined entity looks like, whether it's male or female, which has a lot to do with what's going on in the relationship between the male and the female. So it can be a Joan of Arc character, a very masculine female that the couple is combined to become, that energy, that archetype. So I really appreciate you sharing what you shared. And so I think it's helpful to a lot of people to just, yeah, a lot of my clients, female clients, have used their masculine to get through the patriarch, to survive, to take care of themselves, to provide. Often the father's out of the picture, you know. And so it's a lot to ask, that what is running the show? What tells you to get out of bed? Which part of you are, which voice, and learning to sit with those and get to know the difference. Um, and then, yeah, for men that, putting women on pedestal and not, and handing their power over to women, and trying to, and really like almost creating and forcing the woman to manipulate the man just by the energy in which they show up in, right? It's just like, so our ability to recognize what's happened to us, and then, have the conversations, not just with ourselves but with our partners or with people in our life, even exes, go back and revisit and get to know, okay, what happened? Like, some of those profound healings happen through closure of relationships that are like decades old, like go way back. And you talk to somebody who you haven't talked to in years, it's very significant to be open to these concepts, that we can recapitulate not only on our own and release the heaviness of the story and how it's affecting us currently, but we can free other people up who are still in our field energetically, because closure wasn't provided. And so some of the most beautiful things I've experienced is going back and having closure with people that I was connected to in that way. And um, so yeah, it's just an incredible body of work you're sharing here. I also wanted to inquire about how the work you do in helping people to get off SSRIs, and just how difficult that must be. I've not have no experience with it, and so it's a curiosity of mine. I know people who have been on them there since they were teenagers and have no willingness or interest, or it's terrifying to them, the idea that you would titrate off of something like that, because kudos to you for, I heard you say that you reached a point in your life where you decided you're not unwilling to prescribe these things any further, that you no longer recognize them as, I don't know exactly what you said, but maybe suggesting that they're not actually helpful whatsoever. They may appear to be, but it's essentially a placebo, if anything, that is making that seem so. Yeah, are you seeing that there are courageous people willing to do this? Are these some of your clients that are making these transitions, and how difficult is it?
Yeah. Well, I've written a couple of books about this, so it's a long subject,
Yeah.
and one that I've moved through all of these stages energetically that we're referencing, where I was a card-carrying cult member. I believed so much in pharmaceutically based medicine, and actually was, aggressively positioned against anything that we would refer to as alternative options, thought they were reckless, thought they were dangerous, irresponsible, that I specialized in prescribing to pregnant and breastfeeding women, actually. So I was one of the first 300 in the world of what is called reproductive psychiatrists. And the need for this like burgeoning subspecialty arose from the fact that 1 in 4 women of reproductive age were finding themselves, encountering pregnancy or already pregnant or planning conception on a medication, right? On an
Yeah.
antidepressant specifically. And so I was specialized at the fellowship level in how to analyze the available literature, which at the time was really just pharmaceutical registries, which means that, you have a baby missing limbs and you call the pharmaceutical company. It's a passive reporting system. And nonetheless, there were, 25,000 cases in the registry, in a typical registry at the time. Didn't seem to be a signal of harm in terms of, what's called teratogenicity, which is like what you think of as birth defects, like, visible problems in a live born child. And I was really enculturated around this notion that, not treating so-called mental illness means that you're putting the baby and the mother at so many risks that it would
Right.
be irresponsible not to just continue. And, the literature that we do have suggests that it's fine, right?
Mhm.
So I prescribe to hundreds. I mean, talk about like a karma to unwind. I've been working on for the better part of the past, a decade or so. Hundreds of women and their neonates through breast milk and all the rest, because that is a thing as well. Um, and my awakening, my rupture with the system came when I myself was pregnant, prescribing to these women, right? And I felt inside of myself like I would never take this shit. I don't care what you're saying, Kelly. Like I personally would never take this. And that was a very inconvenient little rumble in there, because I didn't know what to do with that. And I started to feel some degree of like self-consciousness, like, why is it okay for me to prescribe this, but it wouldn't be okay for me? And I've not been somebody to experience what is described impressionistically and subjectively, because this is not, science by any definition, as depression. I've not really touched into that space, but anxiety, well, that was like my bread and butter, right? So I was very familiar, and I just couldn't imagine, taking any of these pharmaceuticals that I was routinely prescribing. Okay. So fast forward 10 months postpartum, and I was diagnosed with my first medical problem. On a routine physical, I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's thyroiditis. And I had that same voice come up that was like, I'm not taking a prescription for the rest of my life. Like, I'm not doing this. Where is the escape hatch?
Mhm.
And that process. So, what I did, which was so out of character for me, based on everything I just said, that you can only understand my destiny to have been somewhat written already, right? Like, why would I have gone to a naturopath, right? Changed my diet, taken fistfuls of supplements and watched my lab work normalize in the space of months. Okay, so that was what I did. So I, worked with that protocol, that lifestyle protocol. I began obsessively researching all things natural medicine. And I ultimately, developed what became this protocol, that I work with, which is a lifestyle medicine protocol. It's a detox that I learned ultimately from my mentor, Nick Gonzalez. It's a specific diet, and then it is contemplative practice. So, it's very basic, but it was charged with the reclamation energy that I brought to bear. And then I would say supercharged by my mentor's anointing of the program. And, you know, he broke the mold on renegade physicians. So it was really that protocol and a book that was given to me. So I'm a bibliophile. My entire life has been paved with just the right book at just the right time. And I was given a book called Anatomy of an Epidemic by Robert Whitaker, who's an investigative journalist. And in that book, he looks at 16 non-industry funded studies. And he concludes after a hypothesis that says, you know, we have ever escalating rates of mental health disability. Could it possibly be, that it's the medications that we are using to treat people that is driving that? He says it much more eloquently than I just did. But regardless, he poses this question, right? Like, why do we have more disability when we have more treatment? Those should be inversely correlated, and they're not. They're tracking together. What's up? And so he looked at all of this non-industry funded literature, and there's so many shenanigans that go on, the FDA and the Pharma Guild. I mean, it's at this point, I think, so well known, I hope. But I sense more and more people are aware that it's, that this a very well honed mafia. It's like it's a laundering business. And they never said they were here to help you with your well-being and your vitality. So it's not even a dupe, right? It's just that we take the bait because we walk around with this wound that says something is wrong with me, right? And I am broken. And so then when you're told through direct to consumer advertising that your brain is broken, right? And we figured it out, and you just have a serotonin imbalance or deficiency, and you just take this medication, and then you can feel good about yourself again. I mean, that's a very hard, if not impossible at times, like bait to resist. But what I learned and what that book kicked off for me was my own curation and deep rabbit hole investigation of all of the available, which there was plenty, literature that really indicted psychotropics across the board. So not just antidepressants, benzodiazepines, so-called antipsychotics, so-called mood stabilizers, hypnotics, all of them, in overpromising effects and underreporting risks. And the risks are really what led me to put my pad down forever. And I did that in 2010, pretty much after reading this book, because I began to learn about the habit forming nature of these meds. In my opinion, and the opinion of millions at this point, they're the most habit forming chemicals that exist. I mean, literally make like OxyContin and crack cocaine and alcohol and cigarettes look like a joke, actually. And why is that? Nobody knows. Nobody knows. These are consciousness altering medications. They fragment your consciousness, right? So if you have these parts, and our struggles in life are when our parts are not aware of each other, right? It almost crystallizes that phenomena. I don't know. I mean, this is just my poetic, musings on the matter, because of course nobody really knows what these medications do, and they absolutely do not do anything of what is suggested that they do, because these chemicals have not even been identified. Receptors don't even exist. Like, all of this is like cartoon level CGI, all of it. And so we really don't know what they're doing, but they do something. And the something may be driven by your belief. That's what most of the literature suggests, by your belief that they do something. But regardless, they do something. And so when I dedicated myself to deprescribing, it's called, to helping women come off of these and all medications, you know, because I had women on acid blockers and cholesterol meds and birth control, you know, pills and whatever. I recognized that it was disastrous if I would start with the taper process, as it's called, without a ritual. So I did that. I did that for the better part of, I would say, like 2 years. And I was running like an outpatient rehab out of my
Wow.
Madison Avenue office. And I mean, the level of medical instability that I bore witness to in these women who were just coming off of routine meds, sometimes that they'd been on, you know, for decades, was astounding. And so I decided to bring my healing experience into my practice, and I began to require, because that, you know, was really my personality at the time, you know, like I played that, uh, that sort of, I don't know, in some ways, the benevolent mentor, right? Like, or father figure probably, role for a lot of these women. And I looked at them and I said, there's nothing fucking wrong with you. And you're going to do this and you're going to do it correctly. And you're not going to come back to another appointment until you've done it. And it was an energy that I naturally brought to bear, and it conferred something. And now I call it permission, right?
Mhm.
But it conferred something. And so what I would see happen as a result of having the first consultation, we don't touch the medications, not 1 milligram. They go, they do my protocol, okay, and they do it, okay, like actually do it. No cheating, no mistakes, like not a molecule of the food on the don't list, you know, kind of a thing, right? So all of their energy now I see is vectorized into this intention. It becomes their whole life and their family's life and whatever for an entire month. And then they would come back, and then we would begin the taper process. And, you know, with some of these psychotropics, it would be, you know, 1,000th of a milligram a month. I actually think the zeitgeist has opened up new portals of possibility. And I think that it's probably not necessary to do it that way any longer in terms of like the slow decrements. That's just my like subjective observation, because there's so many more people now who have reclaimed themselves from the grips of that energy field, that there's like, they're waiting for you. I don't know how to explain it, right? Like even through my own program, there's thousands of people. And now it's like the reclamation is just faster. It's more efficient. But nonetheless, it does require, in my opinion, that ritual. It doesn't have to be my ritual, whatever ritual you need, you have to reestablish the locus of control within. And
Mhm.
that's why I believe like lifestyle change, lifestyle choice is the easiest way to do that, you know, because you change the time you're going to bed, you change what you're eating for breakfast, you know, you change what you're drinking, and suddenly you have this dawning awareness that your choices actually confer change and your choices matter. And your whole system registers that you are actually in control. And I call it sending a signal of safety. And that itself is what is a portal, if we want to talk like, you know, psychobiology, to regenerative physiology, right? You cannot regenerate, balance, establish homeostasis when you're in stress physiology. So how are you going to shift out of it? That pattern disrupt has to be epic. And you're going to know, right? If somebody's on meds, curious, listening, you're going to know what is your portal, what is your doorway. It's going to present itself, and just do it with all your heart. Right? Like do it literally like your soul depends on it, because it does. Because I think that there is an evacuation that happens over time on a soul level in those who are psychiatrically medicated. And you could say even that's true for other types of pharmaceuticals. And I don't know that there's a point of no return. I haven't observed it, but perhaps there is. I have worked with women who and published actually in the medical literature cases of women who were in their 50s on meds, 5 meds for 25 years. Probably the most challenging case I ever worked with was a young woman who she got out. She got out alive and ultimately well. But wow, I thought at times, if I could share video of her darkest moments in the taper process, no one would ever touch a medication again. Um, it was so harrowing. And she was on, an SSRI for 30 years that she was put on for like college anxiety, like run of the mill, like, I'm becoming an adult. Is anybody here to help me? Kind of anxiety. And she stayed on it for 30 years and ultimately decided to come off. I think she was incompletely ready, right?
Mhm.
And and she went through really like almost like a degenerative process where she looked almost like an adult autistic individual, and she was like a pedigreed architect, in her normal life. And it was very illuminating. And that was the case that I worked with, where I really started to tap into something else because I knew that I needed, there were months on end where she was attempting suicide. And I've never in my entire practice had a patient commit suicide ever. And I worked with suicidal patients. I actually believe suicidality is completely misunderstood. I mean, probably a good 30-40% of my patients were on the brink, right? Seriously considering pressing that reset button. Uh, and I really dug deep, right? And for guidance, I stopped charging her money. I've never done that. That was the only time I ever did that. Sort of working with her husband in all these, creative ways, and ultimately, it did. She got through the portal. But it's almost like, we talk about death and birth. Sometimes the portal of reclamation from the realm of psychotropics, I think can be on par with
Mhm.
that process. And so you're only called to it if you are an initiate. I
Mhm.
really believe these people to be um, canaries in the coal mine, and very special. Uh, Not that we aren't all special, but they make up a special sort of class of human initiates. And you would never do that if you were not called to something profound. And I've seen that over and over and over again, that those who make it through really have something extraordinary to contribute to the collective conversation.
Wow. Oh, wow, Kelly, incredible work. Thank you for doing this service. It's similar to shamanic death, and you're serving in a similar capacity as the shaman. There are shamanic healings that happen out there that are very energetic, and depending, a variety of means and methods in which this becomes extreme. And so, I believe we're going out of the old traditions and into a modern way of alchemizing all these incredible things that we have access to through our genetic memory. The veil's lifting, that memory's returning. It's occurring through people like yourself, that embodiment of that wisdom. And the Toltecs say wisdom comes painfully and in driblets. So you've been through some pain in order to have the wisdom that you carry, and really honor your work and appreciate you taking the time to share with us today. And if there's any things you'd like to mention around what you're offering these days or how people can reach you, I'm sure everyone already is following you on my channel, but if there's anything you'd like to add.
Well, first of all, it's such a pleasure to be able to talk the whole spectrum with you. It feels really fun because I have previously felt a bit splintered, into the health reclamation stuff, and then what I call the feminine reclamation stuff. And so that feels really good. And it's funny too that you mentioned the no and the yes, which I'm aware, that you teach about and work on, because my book, The Reclaimed Woman, that is coming out, that I mentioned in June, and it's available for pre-order if you're interested. And we have, sort of bonuses for the early activated folks. The sections are, there's a beginning section that really talks about the poor bargain, right? So the ways in which we felt that little no as women, and we suppress that awareness, right? So we make these poor bargains all the time. And I tell the story of the handless maiden, which is a story I hadn't really been familiar with until a friend told me about it. And so I tell it as rendered by Clarissa Pinkola Estes, but long story short, it's quite a long story, and I break it up over the whole book. But it's, this guy who's totally destitute. He makes a deal with the devil, right, in the forest, and he is promised all the riches, and he only has to give the devil what's behind his house. So he's like, okay, whatever, have it. And it turns out his daughter plays back there, right? And so that's the beginning of the story, and her heroine's journey is our heroine's journey as women, and it is a reclamation, process that is archetypal. And I have observed that it moves through the no, right? So first the reclamation of that no energy, no, and then the yes, right? And simply aligning with those polarities within you. I mean, that's all we need to do. That's it. That is spirituality, right? No special practices or gurus required. And so that's really exactly how the book is broken up, is no and then yes. So I look forward to sharing it. It's such a passion project. In fact, tomorrow I start the recording of the audiobook, which I told myself after my last book I would never do again, because it's like a dimension of hell to sit in a studio for 28 hours and hear your own voice. I mean, it's literally worse than like a difficult ceremony. And it's so personal. This book that I couldn't imagine, you know, some woman reading it. So I will be in the studio tomorrow. So it will be, if I survive, it will be available on audio as well.
That'd be a good way to do it. I never do audio, but I'd like to. I think, especially with your voice and it coming through you, what you wrote, I think that's a cool way to do it. So thank you, Kelly. I'd like to add, I have a course coming up, you guys, if you're interested, for Sundays and Tuesdays for 9 weeks, beginning on May 5th and May 7th. So if anybody's here because of Kelly and wants to reach out and do a consult, I do free consults. Kelly's taken my previous course, and yeah, it's really strong, and I encourage people to consider it. And there's a lot of new folks coming in from some other interviews I've been doing recently. So it's a new community developing, and look forward to all that will unfold. But thank you everybody for taking the time to be here, and look forward to further connections. Thank you so much, Kelly. I hope your time in your studio goes really well, and I look forward to collaborating with you in the future and working together, and can't wait to talk again.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right. We'll see everybody later.